Hey boss, how are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, lots of things. Just tidy up a few items there. There we go.
What we need to nail down today is the final plan.
Yeah,
Final.
exactly.
So that Andrew can and I can map out a deadline.
Yeah, no, exactly. About the recording. Yeah, so here is the agenda. Right. I don't expect many more people today. Fabian, I think, is on holiday. So most of you know, but for the benefit of Andrew and for Mark's oversight, because he was there, the key things that I got from Southampton, and please add afterwards, Mark, to what you got if I miss anything, is for some weird reason, Dave Millard was far and away the best subject, by the way. It was really weird how
No
some people,
surprise. No
yeah,
surprise there.
oh, you can say that again. Absolutely no surprise there. So he had some problems with the laser pointer thing, and I think this build that you just gave us now has changed that. So I think, of course, that's one of the tweaking things we're going to do over the next few months, but there were a few things not understood. So after we go through your demo today, and Mark, I've added you to the agenda, and then when we go through the proposed changes, I think one of the things we really need is a better introduction for people. Because I did tell everyone the same things, what's your hand, what's on this. So just not to go into design now, but just as one detail, it seems we may not need a difference between a library and a reading view. So maybe what we consider is having the sphere be a help thing. You touch that and you get a few things how to use it. Maybe. We'll get into that later, but that was one of the key things. People need help. Hi, Leon. So I'm going to paste in a link to the agenda again, and I'm still just reflecting on, oops, I lost you, on presenting yesterday to the Southampton teacher people, primarily Dave Millard. So one thing was the laser pointer, the other thing was he really wants to do spatial hypertext. He really wants to grab and move. And that is yet another thing you've already presumptively and preemptively done, Andrew. You made that happen more. So one thing Mark and I discussed yesterday was, depending on the distance, maybe at a certain distance, a document is not interactive, it's just movable. Very similar to what Deanie's been saying for a month. So all of the things that were said yesterday are completely within the scope of what we're doing. It is, yeah, all good stuff. The impression, by the way, of everybody who was in there, they really like the spherical, they really like the basic colors that we have, they really like the idea of using that space. So, and shame on me for being a bit Dutch. My Dutch friends never say the positive, only the negative. Generally, there was just lots of fawning over how good the whole experience was, just to make that clear. The final bit that actually came from Mark was metadata in the proceedings that aren't in the documents. And Mark's been saying it in different ways for a while, and it's taken me a while to understand, such as, is it a long paper, is it a keynote? That kind of stuff needs to be addressed as well, something that Dave also felt was, that's what academics need. So we're going to do design stuff later on. That was basically all I have to report. Yeah, good.
Mark, is there anything that you walked away with any impressions that we should know from your
No, I
perspective?
think that was a very accurate tellback, and I wasn't alongside Dave, although I was there. One interesting thing that I sort of put into a comment in the Slack, which one may not have seen, that he made the point that in terms of this first initial stage of the sort of initial deciding what to read, that probably wouldn't it make more sense to do the first sort, like this is the stuff I don't even need to know about, probably outside the space. Now, It's probably true that we decided to do it all in the space, but it may make our use case a bit easier to do if we say we presumptive that basically the binding, as it were, that we bring in is the stuff that we at least think we're interested in. So you may not have pulled stuff from outside. And I did also think that it might help us to focus the initial reading scenario, which I think has had a bit more sort of drift and discussion than actually the sort of reading of a paper, where we seem to definitely sort of moved ahead a bit. In terms of rather than, I think we've tended to bog down in looking at the list rather than if we said no, the aim is to say at least be able to find and select the following papers. Because in other words, what we're not really doing, I think, when we've been discussing that, we haven't been looking at the actual action of marking and doing whatever we decide indicates that selection. I don't say that's a negative, so please don't anyone think that it's not something we deliberately haven't done. I think it's just that we've got bogged down in other stuff. And I have put in, as I think the Fred acknowledged, I put in some more files in the Basecamp, just in terms of things that we might have contingent, so that in a sense, if you were looking at the list, that we might just say, well, just maybe sort of highlight in the loosest sense of the word, maybe just the long papers, or only the ones that are long or short papers, i.e. not the demos and all the others. It's sort of slightly frustrating. Hypertext 22 ran quite short. Say, for instance, the keynotes, including Dini's, are not in there. So if anyone's looking for them, they aren't there because the committee chose not to put them in the proceedings. This happens, is that there's an inconsistency because it's a volunteer team and it changes every time. Little things like that, which are slightly annoying, which you'd expect to be common or not. No, but apart from that, I think it was interesting, and I certainly accord the observation about the onboarding. I do want two things I think stem from that, and I understand one of them is possibly problematic in terms of sharing video out of the Apple. I mean, Freud or Dini or whatever will correct me on this, but I sense that for anyone really who hasn't had a reasonable amount of playing around time, you actually need to put the headset on, already screencasting, so that a qualified person is seeing what the new person is seeing. Anything less than that is just going to make the demo difficult. Now, I mean, I appreciate there are reasons, there are problems in doing this. The reason I suggest it is, if you can see what they're doing, you can say, look at that grey thing in the upper corner or something, or you can see that they're not quite getting the tail back on a grasp or something. And you just can't do that by looking at their hands or something. It's not a problem of our making. I think it's an oversight by the people who designed the equipment, partly because it's come out of the entertainment experience, and the idea is that you get it for yourself. You're so excited, you'll do anything it takes to make it work. Whereas we're actually considering a thing where you're putting it to someone for whom this is not the biggest thing on their agenda. And I think the only way for us to get around that is, if possible, is to be able to sort of start with someone as a sort of co-pilot with them. And that could always be turned off later, but so they can do things on their own. But it's just in a sense of having someone who's almost co-present in the space with you, albeit via an external screencast. We could also rethink about initial videos more in the sense of an onboarding thing, that's sort of saying, here is what you see. A couple of the demos I tried out yesterday actually had that. Seem to have that sort of thing. So it was a mix between sort of instructions, but it's a sort of thing that's basically say, hey, don't freak out. There are things you can do. These are the things. And indeed, I know we've discussed this, so I don't think I'm raising anything new, but I'm just giving tailback. That's I think what I took away from yesterday. So thanks.
Andrew had his hand up. I think he was going to respond to that. Andrew?
I was, and then I realized it was less important because Mark went on and kind of said the thing. But I just want to point out the bit that I thought was like, it's so simple and obvious, but we didn't think of doing it, is making a video to teach the users how to interact and what the gestures are that they can watch before they get into the headset. It'd be such an easy thing to do for the demo in Poland. And then, of course, we can still have like help and stuff inside, but instead of forcing them through a tutorial, maybe we can have the help be optional because they watched the video first. And the video could be like 45 seconds. I don't know. I think it's quite simple and clever.
Can I respond to that quickly, Frodo? That'd be great to make a video. We're going to be making a video anyway, so we're good at this. But we can also make that video accessible through the sphere, right? We can have a tutorial button and let people watch it.
Maybe. I don't know if we can put videos in WebXR or 3JS. I know we can put them inside the headset, of course, but once you're inside our space, I'm not sure. I'll look into it.
Well, this is definitely a topic for a deeper discussion. How many times and in which ways to teach the user how to use the system. But anybody have any other announcements before we go into the specifics?
I do want to make a point of saying that today we have a hard agenda, and that is to walk away for Andrew and I to be able to walk away from this meeting, sit down today when he's on campus, and map out the timeline for December, right? So we have two major things happening. We have the September conference and the November symposium. We want to make sure that all of that is done. Then I can take that information and work with Adam and Fabienne to complete their MOUs. I've got to get those done because we've got to get them both paid and get the money rolling to them. So I have some real hard things I've got to get done today. So anything that's going to take us off track, I'm going to beg you not to talk about it today. Let's wait till next week. I also would like to say that we should probably come up with some themes, and I'm not sure when you want to do that, Frodo. Maybe Monday we can talk about themes. But we should have a theme for Monday today, something simple. And I would beg us not to talk about this project on Monday, just to report on what's gotten done.
I think that's probably, let's see how much time we have today. We all have, at least you and me have very hard deadlines today at the end of the 2 hours. But if we don't get anything talked today, let's post a few things in Slack, just some ideas. And then we can at least start that. But yes, that is concurrently important.
And I'm leaving at 9:30 to get to campus for my own lab meeting.
Okay. So let's
I'm packed
dive in.
up,
Let's
ready
dive
to
into
go.
this.
I
I've got
can
a
just
very
zoom out of
teeny
here.
tiny one just for Andrew to mark because we mentioned doing whether we could do video in the thing. One of the things I discovered today when doing the sort of like the sort of metadata of the proceedings is that as it happens in the 2022 set, there are a fair number of papers have basically an MP4 of the presentation because it was semi-virtual. So that's another thing that we might feed into a demo. I won't go into that now. It's really just sort of, if you're thinking about can we do videos in there, that's something we might actually use as part of the demo, and I'll stop on that. Thank you.
So I have read your report, Andrew. Very happy. I have been in the space. Very happy. Just the fact that you've lowered the list is really nice. Everything looks really brilliant. Please do an introduction while those who can and want to have a live look.
All right. I guess we're going right into the demo.
Right into the demo. No, or you can talk, whatever you prefer, but this is the status of Andrew.
That's totally cool. I'm not used to being so early on in the agenda.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit of like little things in this update. So I'll just kind of run through them while people tinker around. The first obvious thing is the document redesign. So visually, it's been changed to match Frodo's new design. That means I've like removed the borders and simplified the layout as a whole. Doesn't have the scroll arrows anymore, things like that. The drag handles on the top and bottom are gone, so you can't resize it anymore using that. Instead, we have a sort of triangular resize grip in the bottom corner, so it just resizes the bottom, which is totally fine. You really don't need to resize the top. It was just optional. Scrolling has been quite a bit reworked on the document, and I think I personally think it's a big improvement. You no longer have to pinch at the little scroll bar or tap the arrows. You can just aim and point at the document as a whole, and it'll just scroll for you. And then I also put in kind of a velocity because it sort of started to mimic what we're used to on phones. So I was like, well, we're used to being able to throw the text, so I put that in as well. When I was tinkering with it, I'm quite happy with how responsive it is. There's also a new font. So there's a serif font in the document body, not the headers, but the body. Uh, I was having some trouble with it before, as Frode knows, because it was occasionally crashing documents, but I've gotten that fixed, so it should work on all of them now.
Looks great on my system.
Perfect. And then the menu bar down at the bottom of the document, we changed out some of the options, removed a few, and now it has references, which for now just sort of spawns the citation block very inelegantly, just throws it in there. But it was what we've had before, so put that in. There is a quick pinch gesture. So this is why we might not need the library anymore. If you point at the title of a document in the sort of map space and just do a quick pinch and release, it will open the document. So the library view now is just kind of redundant. It does show us the a bit more information, like the authors and the abstract, so maybe it's worth keeping, but that's up for discussion. And then you may have noticed this, the point of the drag system is now not the pointing system, but when you're dragging something, it's now quite a bit better. Before you could, if you move really fast, the raycast coming from your hand would slide off the document because you'd move faster than the document would. And it would now be pointing at something in the background. If there was something there, that would move the laser dot behind and it would snap the whole document and it would kind of look weird. Same thing could happen if you sort of move behind something and it hit something in front. It would now jump forward. It was kind of awkward whenever it would happen. And as we're working with more and more things, getting more and more layers, it's becoming annoying. So I fixed that. So now once you're dragging something, it only looks at that one object and you can pass through things and it won't affect the snapping. So that's the main stuff. There's a whole bunch of like minor adjustments you can read. But those are mostly like little bug fixes and then like the hands are now black because they look better and things like that.
Yeah, it's just, to me, it just feels really, really nice. So many of the mechanics are just so polished. It's fantastic. By the way, one thing I do have to notice that friends have pointed out, I do have resting B face, and I know listening to you guys, I concentrate a lot. So if I come across looking angry, please just check, because with you guys, it has happened. Of course it has, but it's very rare. Anyway, I'm just really paying attention. Right, Mark.
Very quickly, and I apologize if Fred mentioned this and I missed it, but one thing Dave Millard brought up was he said he would like a larger handle at the bottom of the text window. And Fred made, I thought, what a good observation. I said, well, we don't necessarily have to make it bigger, but as long as there's sort of the detection space. In other words, if there's a space that's below the visible bar, this was when Dave was in the Apple Vision Pro, and he just said he was finding the target was a bit too small for him. So just another point. But I'd echo what Fred just said. So coming back to this and just looking at it now, this is looking a lot more polished. Things are the bits are pulling together quite nicely, compared to where we were even a few weeks ago. So thank you, Andrew. Super.
Thanks. Yeah, the bar thing at the bottom. I understand your discussion of having kind of an invisible hitbox so you can grab further. I would disagree with that in this case. I think it's great in other cases, but just because we are expecting lots of stacked objects, if you have invisible hitboxes, you won't be able to reach past it, and that will get frustrating because they'd be like, why am I getting stuck on this document when I'm trying to grab the one behind it? We could try it. I would say, or I would lean towards, if people want it larger, we can just make it a little bit bigger, perhaps.
That's a polish we definitely need to look into, how we move things around. Yeah, Brandel, is there a point on this? Please go ahead.
Yeah. So yes, there is. In the event that you want to resolve larger hitbox things, what I would recommend is to, rather than going with the first hit, then you would go with the thing that has the shortest linear distance to the line segment. So if you have the ability to compute where those incident rays are, then you would be able to say, okay, well, it's on this one, but actually this ray coincides with that one more closely. And so if you need to split the difference, and if it turns out to be a necessity, I fully accept that it's added complexity that takes time and resources to build. But that's the solve, if that makes sense. Does that make sense, Andrew?
So not really, because I'm understanding how that would work if you're trying to grab the object behind and you accidentally get the corner of the one in front. That makes sense. I don't get how it would work the other way around. So I might be misunderstanding a bit of it. You
So
think you could explain?
if you have, it's possible to you know that in 3D algebra, you can compute the distance between two lines.
Yeah, I can do distance detections pretty easily in here.
Right. So if you have a large hitbox on all of them and you have multiple candidates that something intersects through, then you go to a second pass. You know, in physics engines, there's the idea of a
Oh,
broad phase and then there's a tight phase. And so if you intersect with three objects and the nominal large size gross hitboxes, then you then take it down to a sort of a lightning elimination round where you have the world space coordinates of the two edges of the things you have, and then you have the ray of the hit ray, and then you have the ability, and so they may exist like this in space, and then you use the 3D algebra of computing the minimum distance between two lines, and what that does is compute what is going to be orthogonal as the projection ray between those two things, because irrespective of the actual closing distance, it's going to be fixed. You take A cross B, and then you use that as the additional thing, and then from that you can figure out what is the shortest distance that your ray gets to any of the handles, and you populate that only with the candidates whose gross hitboxes are contributing, and then you're guaranteed to activate the one only whose handle is absolute closest. So if you have, yeah, so that would be if it comes up, that's how you
so
would do
it's,
it. If
and
that
by the
makes sense.
closest, do you mean the closest to the actual handle and not the sort of larger hitbox?
Correct. So then
Right.
you have the logical position of those things, and you can use that. You could use three dot object 3Ds or whatever um, as objects that you then get the world coordinates from in order to be able to do this computation. But like there's a number of
Almost.
math libraries
Okay,
Yeah.
that you can,
Randall,
yeah.
sorry. Today we really have to focus on the design. I'm so grateful for your technical help, but today we
Yeah,
have
no,
to.
I just wanted to get the idea out there that you can use a multi-phase to be able to do that. So hopefully that makes enough sense. That if you
Yeah,
want to do that, Andrew, you can. Cool.
I do appreciate that because I wanted to understand what you were saying and it wasn't quite connecting. So that makes more sense. And just to simplify it, it's almost like you ignore the larger hitbox if there's a better candidate behind it. And if not, then you do use the hit. I know that's simplified, but that's more or
Yeah,
less what that would be.
if there's only one candidate, you use that. If there are multiple candidates, then you go to this thing and you only use the one that wins, and it's guaranteed to give you the best. Yeah.
So thank you both for that. And Andrew, I don't think we need to go through your current build more today because it is really, really good. But today is about the next build, so to speak. I think, yeah, Andrew, please.
Sorry, you can finish that first. I just wanted to hop in because there was one more clarification I wanted from you. I guess I can just go now then. You said that during the testing, it felt like the pointing was changed. Um, and while the pointing wasn't changed, what there is happening now is the mana menu, right? If your hand is facing
So
towards you,
what do
it
you mean by,
disables the pinch.
hang on, what do you mean by mana menu? I was going to ask you that.
Oh yeah, I'm just throwing the term
Oh,
around. That's the internal name Deanie and I gave the finger thing because we don't have a
Oh,
proper name
okay.
for it.
All right.
Yeah,
mana,
it's
mana
No,
means
no.
hand.
yeah.
Means
Very
magic
confusing.
also.
Thank you. All right, good.
Yeah, so
Yes.
it's the finger menu. When you're pointing towards yourself, it disables the pinch. And that may not be obvious. Um, so if that's causing problems, I can always keep the pinch on. It's just we were getting false positives and trying to select things on the menu. Actually, what might be smarter now that I think about it. No, I'm gonna do this. I've just solved my own question. When facing you, I disable it. Instead, I won't disable it until the dot on your finger actually connects to a node. And that'll solve the whole thing.
That sounds good. Yeah, one thing that was so strange, and being a male teacher and 3 out of the 4 people testing yesterday were females. Oh boy, I wanted to touch their hands. Obviously, you can't do that with a student, even a PhD, because their hands, like even to use the vision, basic pinch, we get it, right? But they would do this. They would do all kinds of, it's like, what are you trying to do with your hands? They are not octopuses. Pinch. Oh, So that is why we will have proper sessions on the introduction. When you're in our room, pointing means this hand will have an image. Oh my God, yes. So when you're talking about pointing to your hand rather than the space, yes, that was hell yesterday. No other word for it.
So is that different than the males playing with it? Have these women ever played with VR before? Is this just a newbie thing, or is it
No,
gender?
newbie. It's got nothing to do with women. It's just that there was 2 males who were doing it, Chinese student and Dave Millard. Dave, I don't mind squeezing his hand, but it was just because you don't touch any students, right? But it just happened to be, they're sitting down there and they just put it on. They were the first ones. So it's just like, oh my God, I want to tell you how to pinch. It reminds me that this is a professional environment in the headset. It's not a casual, just put it on and anybody can use it immediately. So when we get to it, the way to show, and yes, there was no difference between the male and female users, Dini. It was simply the whole thing of, it would be so vast. Oh, yeah, anyway.
Yeah, no,
I
we
thought it
had
was
the
a Beat Saber
same
thing.
issue. Oh,
What's that?
I thought it was a Beat Saber thing, Froda, which I have to say I'm really good at. I cannot wait to get you in a competition.
Oh, you don't have to wait. I'm not good at that at all. But, right. Okay, so Andrew, for today we're done with you because all the rest of it is about you. Mark, I put in a slot here for you to go a little bit, help express the focus. You said quite a few things yesterday that were very useful. Then I plan to go through a version of the design, which is a sketch for us to discuss. I think we're very close to nailing it down. But yeah, Mark, please go ahead with what you feel like.
Do you want to just give me a prompt, just towards a particular thing you remember, and that'll jerk my mind because it's not sitting at the top at the moment.
Well, the other thing we can do is swap you and me, swatches around. So you go afterwards. So you write some notes in addition to interrupting, which you all should do. Maybe that's easier.
I just mean that there's something in here. I just need a prompt to get it out. What you said.
Okay.
Yeah.
LLM Mark, the key thing is what you said yesterday is we really mustn't forget the use case of sorting through the proceedings, and we mustn't forget that the academic actually cares about metadata from the proceedings binding rather than just only the documents. Those were
okay. I can give you, if you want, I can give you a quick run back on that. Okay. Yes. So a thing that I sort of alluded to at the top of the show for those who are already in the room is that I think something that would help us move forward on the initial presentation phase would be to think of it more in terms of an exercise that has to lead to something. So we don't get bogged down in what the list looks like, but more in that how do I identify different things in the list, and how do I mark them to be basically in another list? I'll go no deeper than that because I don't want to over specify what it might be. In other words, I'm looking at 20, 30 objects. I want to identify, and we could give ourselves a task. I want to identify 3 that are on this subject using the available metadata in the sort of demo type thing, and then indicate that those are going to be some things that I would then open. And the answer might be in the first sense, we just open them, but we can think into that. Some of the data that I put into the sort of the Basecamp files, I've just taken some data out of the ACM site, things like the session name, the session tracks, because they give not always particularly accurate, but they give a sense that, well, these 5 papers or these 6 papers are roughly on the same topic. And that's something that we might be able to show. The other thing is that it's not a given that the order that you take out of the library or say off the serial numbers of the papers bears any resemblance to either which session they were in, the order they were in the session, or the order they were in proceedings. So I think we should assume that there, in a sense, there is no order. So we want the metadata. In other words, whatever order we take, so the numerical order of the numbers of the papers, it shouldn't be assumed to be helpful. So we would want to have some information that shows us basic things. And I'll reiterate Dave Millard's point that maybe the sort of almost the first pass triage of, well, these are things I definitely don't need. If I'm really interested in spatial hypertext, I'm probably not interested in social media recommended systems. So that's a whole session I can just probably don't even need to bring into the space. I mean, we've given ourselves the task of taking the whole thing soup to nuts and looking at it, but I think there is some sense to say what we would start with is perhaps a pre-selection from within. Underneath, we're talking about a binding anyway. So we get to, I don't think it's cheating to take that out, because I just think it might make the process slightly more collapsed and easier, and then we can concentrate on the experience. So I think that was it. Was there anything else, Fred, that sprung to mind?
No, I'm sure you will have more to say to interrupt me, and I hope you will all interrupt me on what I'm going to show next. I just have a brief question for Andrew. You got your headset on, so you can hear me, right? Yeah, cool. You don't need to speak.
Yeah, I just
Okay.
taking notes.
No, absolutely. It's just because I saw you had to put it up for people in the background. Right. So an interaction question. The mana menu, is it currently, because I know it's not working, of course not, we're not there yet. But if you have a document in focus and you then choose things from here, the fact that it's in focus means that the command will be for that object, right? What is the mechanism you currently associate the command to an object in the space?
Right now it's when something is selected, which it would be if you do the drag thing and the objects are highlighted, which only works for sort of the map titles at the moment.
Okay.
If you want to have it always apply to the thing in focus, that could work. I could also see that getting frustrating if you want to apply function to something that's not in focus, because some people don't like reading up close. They want it to be bigger further back. So that whole thing of having the menu be changing based on what's selected is going to be a little bit tough unless we want to keep the quick pinch gesture. Maybe we have the document, we quick pinch at the drag of the document or anywhere on the document, and there's like an outline, an orange outline kind of appears around the whole document, and that means it's selected, and now you can apply functions to it. That might be the most familiar way to do it. People kind of expect selections and things like that.
I'll put this down to be one of the implementation issues we need to experiment with a lot. So thank you for that. Right, so I'm going to share stuff. And this is the wish that it will be agreed design. And the key takeaways, as we just discussed in bullets, better introduction so people know what this is. More work on the laser pointer. I personally like it. It almost feels like I'm a Western gunslinger because I don't even need to look at my hand and it points really well. So it's interesting. People have problems. More conference information, short paper, etc., as Mark just pointed out. And really important, the ability to easily move papers in spatial hypertext without needing to hit the bar or do something complicated. So here is the new design. And Andrew, don't freak out. Structurally, it's basically the same thing. So this is what you would see when you open Hypertext 2023. So you have, it's basically an option for menus or tables of contents. It is shown here super simple. This could be more Brandl style, really, really nice book cover, for instance. But the idea is that we're just going to be really, really straightforward and saying, like Mark earlier said today, and really got into my brain yesterday, some people only want to look at the posters or they don't care about the posters, etc. This is very useful, important contextual information. The stuff below that, authors, institutions, themes, they're placeholders for different kinds of metadata that are in the documents. So the top bit of bullets represent metadata that's in the proceedings, not the document. The second ones represent the document. Does this kind of thing make sense for you guys?
Is this going to be just in the space instead of the library? Is this kind of like a landing page almost?
There is, in this design right now, because of the things Dave said, there is no difference between a library and another space. It's simplified. You've basically done that already, I think.
Okay, I like this then. I think that's good. I've been wanting to move away from the library for a little while, so I think this is going to be smooth.
Okay,
And can we
cool.
call this hypertext 2024 since that's where we're headed?
Oh, Danny, I go so out of my way for you. I'm going to change an entire number. Ta-da! Yes. So also the sphere thing that we have, which is basically our branding now. These bullets might maybe be gray little spheres as well. I don't know. But those are fun things we'll talk about in the future. Mark, please hop in.
Yeah, just a quick one. I'm assuming that well, two things. A is version Ray Hypertext 2024. As I'm the proceedings chair, and I'll have effectively privileged backdoor access to paper metadata, I may actually be able to get us some data. It won't be till early August when the paper's closed, but I may be able to get us an up-to-date set. And I doubt anyone's going to really complain if we use it because it's going to be public in a couple of weeks anyway. The other thing I quickly note is that the one thing I did think about, and it probably maybe falls under the bottom set, is one of the ways you might want to come in is effectively on sessions or tracks. I mean, they get called different things in different places, but effectively they are subgroups within the proceedings. Because I say that the relationship between the order of what turns up on the website the way you interact with it is often a not particularly well defined path. Thank you.
That is actually in the next page. So thank you for highlighting that. Also, Mark, I expect that my paper was not accepted, which is fine. We have our acceptance paper, but if it wasn't, once I find out, then I may take some of that into the human paper. One of the topics that did come up in group discussions yesterday is the notion that accessibility needs to be thrown away because everybody's on spectrums for all kinds of things, from font choices to brain uses and so on. So that was a really interesting thing. And we may be doing some research with this University of Southampton on brain scanning while in XR using your work, Andrew. So this is something I talked to Dini about yesterday, and we'll see what happened. Anyway, right. So the idea is you tap on one of those bullets. What was the cover is now on the side. Arbitrarily here, I put it on the right-hand side. You know, if things go right or left, we can obviously change over time. But the notion is that it's on the right because it's basically a table of contents. So if you are left-handed, it would be on the left now. So as you scroll through all the proceedings in the main box, they are under the categories of tracks, as Mark was just talking about. So that is an option that could be visible or not. If you now on the right were to do short papers, only the short papers would be shown and so on. Does this at this point make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Andrew, how does that look for you?
It kind of just looks like the library again. Is this so this would not have any sort of mapping functionality? This would just be the list of documents kind of in work as before.
Yes, the map background stuff I will come to. I've separated it a lot because it is, I think, a cool thing that uses the space, can also be very useful. But we do really need to look at the core use case, which is moving these bits about. So yeah, right now that is irrelevant. So what happens if you select one, you get a nice little thing, everything else grays out a little bit, and then you get what you already have now on the left, on the other side of your primary hand. Because the whole idea is, again, the table of contents type thing stays within reach, right? What goes in there is obviously something we'll have to keep changing, not the design of it once we decide, but for instance, it may very well say there that it's a long paper. That may be useful there. It may very well also say what room it was presented in. If you were actually at the event, that may be an interesting thing. So we will have to experiment with what what meta goes where. Yes, Mark.
Very quickly, I don't know. One thing we haven't used so far, and for all sorts of good reasons, is color because it rapidly spirals out of control. But I do wonder for some of the things like the long short papers that are fairly structural parts of any proceedings, whereas journals tend to be all articles broadly of a common maximum minimum length, and they vary massively. There is a sort of notion of a short paper, a long paper, a full paper, a short paper, and then various other shorter things. And I don't know whether we use color or something else. We could just do that as a hinting. So I don't know how practical that is, and I don't think I'm best placed to say what it would be. But if it is possible to do that just as a hinting in the display, rather than even needing to have it as a selection, I just put that out there. Thanks.
I'm perfectly happy for us to experiment with that. I just did a silly little thing that clearly doesn't work. That once Andrew has a design that we agree on, to better provide depth of what's in there, such as even making smaller papers as smaller fonts, or an icon, absolutely something I think we should spend time on. Don't get too worried, Andrew. So at this point, it kind of makes sense. Good. So then the next thing, and please look, because it's animated, even though the screen resolution thing. So if you now tear one off, right? So from the main, you lift it off, it goes into the side, and it disappears from the main list. Or not. In the menu on the right, at the bottom it says also show floating, because I honestly don't know if it should or not. I think that needs to be tested. As you build your spatial hypertext, do you still want everything in this view, or do you want this view to get smaller and smaller until everything is in space? What do you guys think?
What would be the point of tearing it off? Because it's just a preview of, like, it's an abstract and information about the document, right? So why would we need to have it once we select that document? Why would we still want it?
The reason for this, and Danny and Mark, this is really, to see if we're on the same page here, this is where we're now getting into spatial hypertext, because this thing could even be smaller. Oh, by the way, the menu on the right can obviously hide. It doesn't need to be there all the time. Sorry, that was just a slide, but this thing can be made even smaller. That's something we have to decide. Because now you have these and you cluster them all over the screen. Some you want to read, some this and some that. So this is conjunction with maybe doing annotation, but it's so you have it. And if you now double click or whatever on this, it should then open up into reading that document, but it would go back. And the key reason I have suggested this is Dave Millard wanted to point to an article or a title and just move it about, not have to hit a bar, not have to do this. So this is not interactive in any other way other than move and open. That's it. Mark.
This is interesting, I think, because it also opens the door to what we've discussed before in terms of doing a sort of a slowly more immersive look at a document. So in the bit you're tearing off here effectively is almost like a sort of meta level on the document. And what you're really doing is you're taking this out, saying, right, goes back to what I was saying about really sort of doing a selection. So you might end up with 3 or 4 of these, and then you might open them. But we can talk about what goes in the small box. But for instance, a small box viewed outside the list might be enough for you to say, okay, actually that's a later or a not at all, without having to go into the whole document. So the lesser amount of information is useful to the user, even if it appears to have no sort of, in a sense, evident purpose. But again, the way I see it, it's just the document object, just in different clothing. Because in a sense, somewhere behind the curtain, all the same metadata is there that we would share if it was a full document. So I don't know if that actually helps in terms of making sense as to how to piece the bits together, because we'd also discussed this fact that if you've got too many documents open or you put them in the background, you might want them to just be an icon. And again, your mind can deal with that. It doesn't need to be able to read the thing. It knows that you know that you put that thing over there on the left because it's not like the thing on the right. And you don't really need to know much more about it until you decide that you want to bring them right forward into focus, or you want to get rid of them, or you just want to put them in a different place. Does that make sense at all, Andrew? If not, do say.
Yeah, like the concept does. How it is implemented remains a bit to be seen, but I think I've got it.
It really does. And if we settle on this kind of an approach, that's what the next few months will be about. You know, exactly how this feels. And also here, the main document, the proceedings, excuse me, is also collapsed. And all these designs here are just indicative of smaller things. How we now choose to close any of these, how we focus, all of that will probably be related to the hand as well as gestures, right? So at this point, I think we will probably need a special session if we agree on the design today to really design the mana menu, because that's going to be just so key, right? And also these, just to go back, the items in space, the element types of things, I still think are potentially very useful, but I think that they don't need much design today. They simply need to exist as text that can be moved around. When Andrew can get to it, we will look at what happens when you select one, how it points to papers that correspond to that thing. Obviously, it'll be more, but that's the beginning of it. I don't know. What do you guys feel at this point?
What does Andrew feel?
I mean, I can try to implement whatever the group decides on, as long as it's
I-
not a full change.
Okay, let me step back then. Knowing that we have year one to complete by December, let's say,
Yeah.
because Christmas holiday, we'll say the 15th, right?
Yeah. End
What
of
is-
November-ish.
So we're really shooting for November, right? Because we want to have as much possible done for the symposium, and then the feedback we get from the symposium, we have a couple of weeks to fine tune, and then we can make that part of the year one report. So we're shooting for November 23rd, right, for the demo to the group. So, what can we do this year one that's part of the reading process? How much can we offload to year two, which is part of the writing process?
So the most important question here is, of the approach you just saw, Dini, what do you like and what do you not like? Because you do represent the core user in this. Do you want me to run through it so you can just speak on top of it? Are you thinking, Dini?
I am thinking, I'm trying to process this. I mean, we're doing things on the fly, and then we have to walk away with this and implement it. So, what I want to see us be able to do, let's step back and talk about the big picture.
Yeah, let's do that without looking at it. I agree.
Very
Yes.
quickly. Okay, so this just brainstorm together. So just let me just complete my thoughts. So we have already decided that, and we already know that people who've never experienced VR before need some sort of tutorial to get them started. At some point in the future, we won't have to worry about this, but we need to implement that. So somebody puts on the headset, they get the option, they get the sphere with an option for tutorial. All right, they go through the tutorial. Now they want to read something, right? So they can tap on the menu, right? Read something. Something comes up in the space. Now they want to manipulate it. They want to do something to it so they can read it, right? So what does it mean to read that? So they have to go through a series of things that they have to find something to read, right? Read it. And then next year, we're going to figure out how to respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all we have to do for year one. And we've done a lot. We've done a lot of, I think, conceptual thinking, everything from a mono menu to using appendages to thinking about what a library is, not needing necessarily a library, but just reading matter of some sort. Getting things, and then the first hurdle we crossed was getting something in the headset, right? How do we do that? So we've made a lot of progress in the 6 months that we've been at this now. So what's left to be done is just fine tuning what we have. So go back to your model, Froda. Let's step back through that for a second.
Oh, she's not home yet. Oh, sorry, I thought you meant my wife. Yes.
Start from the very beginning. And Andrew, let's walk through this together with everybody. Headset on, I've gone through the tutorial. This is my choice, right? Here are the things that I can do. So I click on, let's say I tap on long papers. Tap.
I have a question here, actually.
All right. All right.
One of the issues that's inherently difficult in XR is the laser pointer thing, selection of the distance. Uh, and we only have 5 digits, of course, most of us. However, maybe what we should do is reserve maybe just thumb and little finger so that you use your other fingers to select things here. Like the top items will be available here because then you just look at this and you tap, boom, it's the corresponding finger. I don't know. Anyway, that was a bit silly. Back to you, Dini. That was a bit far.
That's what I was saying. Okay, so let's say I decide I want to read long papers. So I select long papers. Okay, now, how do I select long papers? Am I laser pointing this, Andrew?
I would assume so. I like keeping
Okay.
the interaction as consistent as possible, so I think it would be the same.
Perfect. So I laser point to long papers, click on it again. Rhoda?
Is it likely we will be able to incorporate speech? So when you look at this, if you say long papers, just for context.
I mean, it's definitely a stretch goal.
Okay,
Considering the
fine.
amount of
Stretch goal is
time, I'd
no.
rather get it working first without it.
Okay, fine. Absolutely
Adding
fine.
a new mechanic, especially at the demo where there's lots of background noise and someone's trying to say long papers, it would be, I think, just annoying for them.
Okay, fine. Absolutely agree.
Okay, so I click on long papers. This comes up, and this is the long papers. Now, I may have to scroll, right? There may be a lot of papers to put in this space. And the scroll that you've devised, Andrew, makes it a lot easier to scroll down, right? So now I pick one of them. Let's just, for the sake of being easy, the first one, companion of news.
Sorry, it's going to have to be the bottom one.
All right, the bottom one, whatever. Okay, I pick Vivi literally, whatever. I can't read that anyway.
Vicky
And
Library.
that comes up. Okay, it's too little for my eyes. Okay, so I click on that one, and I click on it by tapping it, right, or pointing at it with my laser pointer. That comes up. Okay, now there's that menu item. It gives me some background information. I can decide I don't really want to read that one. I want to go back and read something else. Now I want to go back.
Hang on.
Yeah, I have a question. I think I see where Dini's getting at here. What's the difference between showing that abstract preview box and actually opening the document? Is this going to be the same mechanic as before, where if you hover over it, like the current library, that box shows up? Or if you
Yeah.
want it to open on tap, then what opens the document?
Okay, so I think the question is one step ahead. The next thing you would want to do is lift it. So let's say that is the primary use case, lifting it out. Then we can look at these other ones. So we probably want to point to it, to lift it, point to it, pinch, move, right? That makes sense. Like moving something out of a file on the desktop kind of thing. If we want to enable that, should we have the user point to the box on the left to do the tearing away, or should it be the paper in the main column? How do they move it out?
It's the paper, the thing that's come out. If you want to remove it, if you want to like move it, it should be the object that you just put off to the side. It should not be in the main menu.
Because one design thing we have here that really bothers me is we have the same information in 2 places, which is not very sculptural. So that's partly why I'm wondering about it. I mean,
Well, it's not the
maybe.
same. It's not the same information because this is the. Can I finish walking through? Because this is the.
I'm
this is-
sorry. I was just trying to do the clicking thing you're talking about. Yes, please.
Yeah. So let's just stop for a second. So let me just finish this thought because I want to get this on record for Andrew and I for later today in the week. Okay, so I have pulled out that document. I've decided that I don't want to read that one, right? So I want to put it back. So how do I put that back, Andrew?
Once you tear off the
No, before tearing off. Right?
before
I'm not
tearing off,
tearing
like
it off. I'm just looking at it and going, I'm perusing it. I don't want it. I don't want it.
right. So if this works like the current library, you would just hover on something else instead, and it would switch.
Okay, so
Which
Oh,
I think is nicer than having to select it every time, but it also can get annoying. I guess there's both sides to it because if you're trying to read it, you have to keep your hand in exactly the same place. So maybe that's obnoxious. What we
Okay.
could do, we could add a button onto that preview that says open document.
Yeah.
So then tapping in the main list here of all the papers will always just open the abstract box, whatever we're calling it. And then in the abstract box, there's a clear button that says open document. And
Yeah.
everything's done just by tapping stuff. That would probably be best.
Okay. So then I've decided to read that document. So now I want to open it. As soon as I click open, then I would imagine at that point, Froda, that's the document that kind of tears off of everything, and it's hovering so that I can see it better than any other thing on the screen, which means I can move it around, I can bring it towards me, and I can eventually annotate it in year 2.
Right. Agree on all points. So we have to answer some questions here. First of all, the list of papers currently only have the title, no names. Should the list also include the names? Because if not, they need to come up in the mouse over or the tear off. What do you guys think?
Okay, I thought we already decided that if you go back to your menu, you've got all papers, long papers, then you have authors,
Oh yeah.
institutions.
If
If I
you
wanted authors, I can go to authors.
okay, so okay, absolutely fine.
One other thing, can I mention one more thing? One thing we could do is when we say all papers, it'll be the bibliographical information as an ACM bibliograph, right? It'll say the whole thing. It'll be the latex. I mean, that would be the most obvious response. It's like all papers would be like, here's the bibliographical information, the title, the author, the year, blah, blah, blah. And then if we have authors, then it's just the authors. And we can also have titles and institutions and themes at the bottom. So we have 4 things at the bottom of the menu.
Okay. Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah, I'm just going to hide this text here for a moment. Right. Okay. So this is actually quite complicated. So I agree with you. And currently we only have titles in this main column, right? So then
We don't want to, though.
Hmm?
I don't think we want, what I'm saying is if you're going to divide this by all papers, long papers, short papers, and posters, that's the complete bibliographical information for each paper. Then in the second half, where you have authors, institutions, and themes, we add above authors titles. And then we just
Okay.
titles.
No, that's clever. Okay, so yeah, I agree. Okay, so what you're saying is, Mark, do you also agree that because you can choose to view just long papers or whatever, these listings will be title and author right here? Is that agreed?
Yeah, I think that's fine. One of the things that's contingent to this, I was about to note in the thing, but I'll say it out loud, is that actually when you show this bit in the sidebar, whether it's due to a hover or an explicit open, is that when we talk about having an open action, I think you might do one of 2 things. You might indicate to preview it or to open it. Now, to the user, these are different things. Back of house, actually, it's the same thing. Out of the list, you're creating a new data object. How you clothe it, how you render it on screen from the metadata behind it, just depends on what the user asks to see. So if they ask to see a preview, they see the little note, and then they might want to decompose further or not read it further. If they've asked to open it, they've decided they want to go into the same thing. But to my mind, it's the same data object behind the curtain.
Yeah.
It's just the visualization. So we're tracking sort of 2 different things in terms of one is how we construct it, but the other is that we follow the user's intent, because the user at this point the reader is trying to work out, okay, is this what I thought it is? Is it actually worth me doing more with? So I can either basically put the card back in the pile, or I can take it right out, or I might, which tracked back to what we said about Dave Millard's comment, I might want to take 2 or 3 of these in quotes at the moment preview mode and sort of look at them together, because what I might be trying to do is sort of associatively think over those things. But again, if we hold on to the fact that it's all the same data, it's just we're not showing all of it.
Yes.
We think of it in terms of objects. I think that gives you a quite clean transition.
Right. Okay. Yes, makes sense. So here's the thing. When you do a mouse over, then, considering you have title and author always listed, what you probably want is to have the abstract come up. Maybe an AI summary, that's a detail in the sense that it can just be added in the box. So what might make sense, when you point, don't select, when you point to this one, you get this quite large thing floating on top of it,
Yeah.
not obscuring the beginning on the left, so you still know what you're looking at. And if you then choose to drag it off, this thing is just this abstract box is just a floater. You can't actually touch it.
Yeah, your abstract box is going to be about twice that size if it's going to show the abstract, just real world.
Yeah.
No, so it's not to, no, sorry, it's not to critique the thing. I'm just making that point. The other thing that you might want to know, this I can't remember who brought this up, but this came up in conversation the other day, is you might want a few sort of metrics. So you might want in there a bit of contingent information, like say the number of references, the overall reference count. Because what does that tell you? Well, if it's got 0 references, it's probably it might be a very conjectural piece. If it's got a ton of references, it's probably kind of an index piece, which might spark a different interest in you. So it might alert, some of this heavily referenced might alert you to something. This is probably
okay, Mark. I'm just going to interrupt you because I fully agree.
Okay.
So I'm putting that as a further data, right? So we have abstract and further data. Basically, the key thing we've decided here is that when you point to something in the list, you get abstract, maybe AI summary, and further data to be discussed what it is, right? And that's just a floater that you can't interact with. Now, if you click on it, click and drag rather, that's when you move it off. That's when you move it from the list onto the side. And here you basically have the whole document. Right, so let me just indicate a design, not a real design. So because of the Dave Millard requirement that we all agree with, you probably want to be able to move this all over the place. You should probably have options like make it even smaller, right? So you can put it in space, or maybe all it is when you move it up is something small, and then you have to double click that to open it to read. So this is for spatial, hypertext is not for reading. Sorry, I think that probably makes sense. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah, and I think we won't know till we try, which way, whether you start big or start small, something.
And I also think as soon as we start, can I say this before I get stopped?
Yeah.
When I'm just putting it out there lovingly. When I'm looking at I'm looking at data that I'm just kind of perusing, right? I don't need to control it. What I need to control is stuff that I'm trying to digest. Right. So if we think in terms of perusing and digestion, right? If I'm just perusing, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll look at that one. Click, bring it up. Okay. I don't really want that one. Goes away. Click. That's the one I want. That's the one I want. I want to control that one. I want to eat that one. I want to consume it. I want to do stuff with it, right? That's the one I want to bring towards me. That's the one I want to move around. That's the one I may want to keep and put over here. So when I look at the next document that's in the same theme, I eat that one, consume it, put it next to this one. I start to synthesize. And maybe I'm seeing a different theme arising. Maybe it's something that I'm interested in. I'm taking it a different direction. So I guess what I'm trying to say to boil this down is anything that I'm just perusing can stay a little bit less spatial. As soon as I want to do something with it, we're talking spatial hypertext. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let's make that.
I'm glad that Dave agrees with me, because if he didn't, I'd probably be arguing into the wind today. Love Dave Millard.
One other quick thing I noticed, and I don't want to sort of try and get into the design of it now, but I think it would be useful, if possible, to have some sense of the things that we've looked at and which we haven't. And I know that's hard because there's a difference between sort of, in a sense, looking at something and then looking at something deliberately. And it's even harder in in this space, because you may get mistracking. So I don't want to go deeply into that, but I think it's something that will be useful in this initial triage thing, because as Deanie said, if you've got a list, it's just thinking, oh, have I actually sort of looked at them all? If there's some subtle tellback, and it may be you've looked at it and didn't do anything, but the point is, at least what it tells you is there anything I haven't looked at? Is what it really answers.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. So what I'm trying to design here with you guys, the bits I'm moving about, is for a relatively new user. There should be kind of shortcuts for a lot of these things, but a new user is important for us. So we've agreed that once you highlight something, you get a floaty bit with extra stuff that is just a floaty bit. But because of what you just said, Deanie, one of the key actions you want to do is hide stuff. You want to get rid of the grunge, right? So in order to do that, why don't we have, and not by this design, once you highlight something on the left, there's a few menu items. Lift/focus, we'll decide on one to do the tearing apart, which should also be a gesture. Read later, maybe as a tag, but then very, very importantly, the hide option.
I have a mild dissent on this, in the sense that if you embrace the sort of spatial hypertext approach that Deanie's just said, you don't need these choices, because that's what you do. That's what the spatial bit is. You put the things you want. That's how you tend to use a spatial map. So in other words, we're forcing ourselves to make distinctions we don't need, because for each reader that will be subtly different what the meanings are. So I mean, I don't mind if it's there, but I suspect it's not needed, because if we're getting people to embrace the spatiality of it, our sort of associative thinking and map building will actually take care of that, because we generally will probably put the things that are interesting against the things that are mildly interesting. But I'm not going to, that's not a firm point.
I think that's fine, but a key thing we all agree on is we need to keep clutter to a minimum. So
no, that's the whole point of spatial hypertext. If it's tidy, you're probably doing it all wrong.
I'm not
Clutter
talking about
good.
Clutter and tidy are not opposites in this context. What I'm saying is that there will be some papers you will not want to read, so they will be in the way, right? Right.
But they're only in the list. So in a sense, they never leave the list.
Okay.
So that they're already, sort of, in a sense, gated by being in the list. So they never escape it, because you take them out.
It's still a big list. There is still, for me, a lot of social media stuff I don't want to read. I don't want to see it. So if maybe we just have then is a button, so to speak, maybe it's confined to the mana menu. I don't know. You look at it and you hide it. At least, yeah, Deanie.
Can I say something from an archival standpoint? I really think we don't want to, I think we want all the papers, when we say all there, and they stay there. And I think this is going to be a lot cleaner, because there may be things in the social media that does pertain. I mean, we might be thinking in the future, how does XR affect social media, and how can we, connect social media environments to XR? So I think there can potentially be that, and I don't think we want to be messing with hiding anything in the alls.
Why? Why from an archival point of view? I'm a reader. I'm going through this. I'm trying to decide what's interesting for me. It's only a local view for me. And of course, once something is hidden, there will be an option to see all hidden.
I have a suggestion that I might meet both those. That is, if you, howsoever you indicate it, if you've indicated something that is essentially to be removed, hidden, whatever, if it would basically be placed at the bottom of the list, which might well be sort of scrolled off screen if it's a long list. So in other words, because actually, as we've discussed, the listing is actually fairly arbitrary, the order of the listing. So as long as the list that we see is giving us feedback of the stuff we might have missed, and of but no, because so it can all remain there. So we want the stuff that we're interested in broadly to maybe filter to the top. I mean, I don't draw a distinction between top and bottom, but you want them. You're separating them essentially in the list. So the sort of hide element, to take Deanie's point on board, might be literally just to move them maybe down below a visible ruler or something, because that's your visual tellback that these are now basically in the chum bucket.
So the way I've done this in the library of Reader, you can select a document, you have a few options. Pin is favorites, it goes on top with a bullet. Hide, it removes it from the lists. And then at the bottom here, there's options as hidden documents. It shows the hidden documents.
Andrew,
But-
how does this work for you? Let's talk to Andrew about this.
I mean, I don't currently have that mechanic set up, but I could add it. I can hide stuff easily, but having the hidden stuff go into its own category, also I can do that. Just don't have it set up right now.
Okay, let me ask you the next question then, the obvious question. Based on our deadlines, is this something that can be done before November?
It all determines on priorities, right? If I focus on just this, absolutely. But this would be another thing getting put onto the list, which is fine. That's how it works. We're gonna have to prioritize what's actually the most important.
That's what I'm
Um,
trying to get done today.
it seems
So-
like the new thing is always the most important. So I get the feeling that this is now the important thing. Um, but I do have quite a few things that are not yet done, at least not to the standard that I was expecting. But if people are happy with things where they're at, then they are done because this whole thing is just testing.
So since I'm leaving in about 10 minutes, about 15 minutes, can we go through the things you haven't done yet that we've talked about today that we want to see done? Can we just kind of run through those? Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean the things we've talked about today, they're not as long of a list, because it's mostly just been this. But I've got. Like, do you want me to go through the list of things that I don't want to derail the whole conversation, but
No,
like the
no, I
stuff that
want to
I
know
have
what we've
written
been
down?
telling you to do that we haven't been able to do because the list is getting longer and changing.
Okay. Um, well, a lot of it is like sort of pseudo functions, things that we've put in that don't do anything. They may never do something, but having stuff that's in there for the demo that doesn't do anything is going to be a little bit confusing. Let me pull up my big old list here. Um, so the new document layout isn't done yet. It looks fine, and that's all good. Um, but it doesn't scale at all, so focusing it and stuff doesn't work well. Um, if we ditch focus though, that's not a problem, or if we keep it as it currently is, which it just gets a little bit closer. There is the push pull thing. We were trying to move scale back and forth. We were trying to do something with that. Um, I can put that aside, but that was only half finished. In fact, it never made it into a prototype because it wasn't working fully. There's been talk about the library. Luckily, that's what this is. We've talked about having a history feature. Um, there was redesigning the save system. There was getting rid of pop-up menus and putting those as icons. There was having multiple focused objects at once. Um, some of these are done. I'm going through my list here. Hold on. There was adding tags and sticky notes to documents. Save files have kind of excessive bloat, so we're going to trim that. Citation block doesn't have a word wrap. There was adding audio. There was passing info to an LLM like ChatGPT or Claude and getting that back in the main menu. Also, I've been writing down everything that people like decide on, like we want this. But I know they're coming in much faster than I can actually do them. That's not a problem. I'm keeping the notes just for my own reference. But since we are now refining and deciding what's necessary, we should sit there and be like, this is what's locked in, which I think is what we're doing today.
Yes.
This design here, replacing the library, I think is a very good call. I like that a lot.
If you're able to, when you're doing that, it may be useful if you can put any, in a sense, implicit to you constructionally dependencies that, from a user perspective, we might not miss, because I think that helps us help you. Because if we ask for number of things that all actually have different sort of dependencies. In other words, it balloons the work. It's quite useful to help us help you to make decisions when we've got too much in the manifest.
Yeah, and I try to bring those up when it's like, hey, can we do this thing? And I'm like, technically, yes, that's going to be like 3 weeks out. Um, yeah, it's good. I'm glad you guys have let me do that.
Rhonda,
Okay.
can you tell us what you want? Can you just say, okay, of those things on that list, this is the priority, and then we can just call it good.
I would like to just kind of almost archive that list and be like, hey, this was the initial ideas before we knew what we were doing. Set those aside, and then we can
Yes.
just look at this new design and be like, all right, this is what we're doing now. If people are fine with me setting that list aside and be like, stop stressing about it, then I'm fine with it too.
So, okay, let's do that. I think that's a very mature thing to say, and I just realized that sounds patronizing. It most definitely isn't meant to be. We are dealing with a lot of things here, so I'm very grateful you say that. So, I'm just going to go through this now in the mission of what Dini said, and I'm going to say how I think it works. If Dini and Mark, if you think it works different, obviously stop me. And Andrew is going to say whether that's stupidly hard or easy within the world we have now. Okay?
May I ask a favor? Can we put titles above authors? Are you against that?
The all papers, long papers, short papers, and posters all show the titles.
No, those are going to be the complete bibliography, like everything. Whereas the next section is just the specific aspect.
You mean you want to have a view that only shows titles?
Yeah.
So that will be all titles then?
No, all papers is going to be the entire. So you know what a bibliography is, right? So I look in the back of a book and it tells me the name of the author, the title of the work, where it was published, the date,
Yeah.
the DOI, all of that information. That's what I want for the four things at the beginning. And then in the four things at the bottom, it's just that stripped down information, just the title, just the authors.
Okay. Okay. I don't mind. I don't care, which is very important at this point that we don't care about things we don't care about. Totally fine. So the way I'll present this to you now, Andrew, is this is just a rectangle with text in it that provides initial views. The team will decide what these views are with testing over time, right?
Right. And I can swap those out to whatever you want right now.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. So the design will initially be something this simple. If we have stretch goal time, we may make it much more interesting. Mark and I discussed yesterday, it could even be a pop-up book that includes a map of the venue. It could be all kinds of things in the future, but for now, it's two lists. One of them, yeah, anyway. Once is selected, the main big thing comes up showing the contents of that. Exactly what it is also something to discuss, but it's each one of these items is a paper. Thing on the right should be the same as the initial one. There will be some options popping up later, maybe. On mouse over of one of these,
Can I have a quick clarifying question?
of course.
That thing on the right, you said it's the same, because visually it is, of course. Is it actually staying in space and the rest of this is appearing off to the side of it? Or is it moving aside and the new thing is appearing where it was? Because that's an important distinction. And since we don't have any landmarks, I can't tell what you're planning for that.
I think that this is one of those things that should look exciting. It should look dimensional. So that's something with your knowledge of XR 3D coding, visually it should be the same. But whether it moves to the side and the main list comes out of it or not, or the list comes out of it and this comes out of the side, there are so many options. But please tell me if you all agree, this has to look quite fun. Because it's the ta-da moment, right?
Having little animations, making anything move immediately makes the user go, ooh. So I'll have it slide or scale or something. Sounds good. I wasn't sure if you cared. It sounds like you don't mind. I'll just come up with something.
Yeah, I mean, you've done so many coming up with some things. It's always a joy to see what you've done. The one animation that I'm not thrilled about that I forgot to mention is when you open a document, you have this yellow spinner. I don't like that one bit, and that's totally fine. That's a design thing we can talk about later, what kind of thing. But everything else you've done is just like, yes, spot on.
Oh yeah, that can look like anything, but it is important to indicate that the document is loading and not just that the program ate your input. So
Yeah,
something needs to be there.
ideally, I would like the title to pulse a little bit, like it's trying to get big, and then boom, it goes big. But that's just a thought. It may not even look nice and perfect, but that's the kind of thing we can test once we have the structures in place, the loading indication thing. Yeah, Mark, you have something here.
Just yeah, a very quick one because I know time is limited. In terms of that right-hand box, like the original box, effectively that's still controlling what is in the larger box, whether they're attached to one another or not. Is probably an implementation detail that I'm not too concerned about. Either in a sense, if one is a draw on the side of the other, or whether it's a separate physical object in the environment. But it's still the case that effectively, if I click something in that right-hand draw box, whatever, it will actually repopulate the bigger box on the left in the design we see. Good. Okay, understood.
Yeah. And currently, this is lacking a little bit in terms of depth, spatiality that we talked about, but we can see how we can keep moving with that. Right. So once you're doing a mouse over, or even a select, I don't actually think it should matter at this point, you get this block of abstract and other further data floating over the thing. On the side, maybe we only have the hide, maybe we don't have that, maybe we have more, I don't know. But a thing on the side allows you, without thinking, without doing mana menu, I don't care about this, right? This is what I would like, and this is a big question for you, Andrew, and I think we all want the same thing. To move it off, it would be really nice to point to it, pinch and move, rather than a click or a button. Is that?
Yeah, that makes sense. Just kind of to
Yeah.
pull it off.
Yeah.
I'm still not like from a personal design perspective, I don't understand why we're tearing it off, but that doesn't matter. I can implement it, so
Because we're
that's
going to
fine.
read it. That's the one we're going to read. When we pull it off, that means I really want to read that one.
But that's just an abstract, right?
Hang on.
No, no, no.
Not read that paper, but maybe read the abstract. I want the abstract out there, and I may want a couple of other abstracts, and I'm going to put them off to the side to read later, even.
Oh, hang on. This doesn't have the abstract. Okay, so this is really, really important, and we have 7 minutes left. Currently, this is just indicative of the documents. You can do more with it. So maybe what you do, you only have the title and the author names, but if you interact with it by clicking, it grows into reading space. Maybe it needs to go focus, or do you want, Mark and Dini, do you always want the abstract available in this view?
Couldn't we just have a little button that says read abstract in that little box?
Well, I mean, one thing you could have is you point to it and it grows bigger.
Okay, that's fine. Whatever. I mean,
Yeah, my only observation is I get back to the point that effectively it's all the same information under the hood. So it's a data object in the environment. So what you see is effectively what style you give it. And I think that will sort of evolve because partly through different tastes of different readers, but we'll get a feel for size. But the key thing is essentially you take something out of the list because it is of more interest than being in the list. You're probably going to read it at some point, but not necessarily directly in its full sense. You might want to look at several together because that's part of the decision-making process, which is why you pull it off. So we basically need. There might be that people want to go directly to the read, in which case I suggest that's probably a different indication. I'm just rehearsing these so you can say no, or that's really difficult. But broadly, you pull something off to get your first overview read of it. This is sufficiently interesting to want to see outside the list. I want to do spatial hypertext things with it, like put this group away from that group, and then having those, I then might want to interact with them. And I do take the point that was brought up earlier that once we go into reading a paper, then probably the other things can literally just become almost like images or spaces or something. They don't need to be fully active text objects, because I'm very aware of what you said about the background loading, if that makes sense, because I'll put the other way around. What I don't want to do is suggest something that's just creating a nightmare for you in presentational terms or in sort of loading on the system.
Can I quickly say two things before I have to go? First and foremost, when it gets to some point, I don't want any more boxes. I want to go back to saying I don't want boxes. And so if we can have an option to toggle the boxes off at some point, that'd be great. If not, I can live with this design for a while. Secondly, there's things on Andrew's list that we could put as part of the MOU for potentially Adam and for Fabienne, right?
Yeah.
So what I'd like for you to do, what we're going to do today, Andrew's got a list. He'll share that with everybody in Slack. And Froda, if you could go through and click on and tell us which ones of those you really, 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 really want. We can share those with Fabienne and Adam to see which ones they really, really, really want to do.
Yeah.
And then I can finish that MOU.
Yeah, no, that's good. Absolutely. Now, this is really, really important, this bit. So let's just spend another few seconds on it. So you tear it off and you have some sort of indicator that you are seeing more or less. In this case, it just happens to be a bar, right? If you click on that, you get all the goodies, abstract or whatever, but you have to double click it, so to speak, to open it into a reading view. We haven't discussed the reading view today. That's what you've done is really, really close to what we want to end up with for this stage of the project. But if you want to, so this can be toggled big or small through some kind of an interaction. And then the other thing that we need to discuss is, how do you make these tiny? And then we need to discuss what's going to be putting on the hand. But the mechanics that you need to look at, Andrew, as far as I see them, are how to change what's in the lists, how to let us drag things and make them bigger or smaller, how do we then make them big, what should be on the hand we will need to discuss, but your job, of course, will be to make things appear on the hand and then actually actionable. We will not put a million actions on there. It should be enough for you to implement and for the user to care about. And then also, I really do think when we need to experiment with putting a few things in space. What we may do in the beginning for actual testing is words like XR or humanities or social media, whatever it might be, that we know are in there, so we can start experimenting with them.
We have those
Yeah.
in space already. But
They're
I
just
got one
not
more
action-
clarifying.
Sorry,
Okay.
I interrupted you. I didn't mean to. Please go on.
Clarifying question, when you say make it big, is that showing the abstract, or are you picturing that turning into the document?
Those
No,
that is-
I imagine that if we want to read the document, right, we would then there'd be a menu item which says read document, and that would come up.
Yeah, so some kind of button. Getting to reading the document is rather buried. Is that okay with you guys? You
What
have to
do you
go
mean?
through like 5 different taps to get to it.
No, it should be simple. So if you are looking at it right here and you want to read the document, you should be able to something like double tap and it'll open into reading mode right now.
Well, we don't want to keep adding a whole bunch of new gestures.
No,
Like-
that's exactly why this is so important. So here you should be able to do only two things with these things. One, select them, you get this instant thing. Two, drag to the side and they appear in a small form. 3, double click or equivalent to open. Only these, right? And then there will be a toggle between what you see on the left here and the reading view. These things, we will have some sort of a button or some kind of a means through which, because what you have to remember, Andrew, from the spatial hypertext perspective is when you want to read, it's big. When you want to have just an indication of it, it's tiny. So to go in and out of that is really important. So when you have many things, many titles in space to really help you think what these things are, you should be able to drag, move, drag, move, drag, move.
What I was trying to ask was when it gets large, what is in there?
The full reading document.
So it is the full document. That's what I was asking. I thought
Sorry. Okay. Well,
thought you said it wasn't.
There seems to me there's an intermediary.
So is this another redesign of the document? That's
No,
what this sounds like to me.
No. Okay, now I understand your question better. Sorry, I was very slow. Mark and Dini seem to want to have instant access to the abstract when it's small. I think what you're telling me now, and I agree with you, because we show, when you tear it off, we show the title, the author name, and nothing else. Maybe we show tags on later if we do tags, but nothing else. If you double click on this, you get into reading view. right? We don't need an intermediary abstract here, because let's say, Mark, you are moving this and you want to look at the abstract. You just double click, it goes big, and then you get rid of it again, right?
Yeah, I mean, my sort of mental picture of it is that once I've torn the thing off, I'm basically saying make object 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 a data object in the environment, and how it's clothed is what we define for that state. When I go into full read state, that same data object is re-rendered in the full document thing that I think we're all pretty happy with at the moment. So it's the same. It's almost like sort of switching the prototype. So what it is tells you how it looks. So you can either go from the list direct to the reading mode, which is the sort of what's been suggested in a double tap. In other words, I'm just going to read this. I don't need to see anything else. The spatial hypertext bit more is, no, I want to basically have representations, sort of placeholders, if you will, for these. And I think we shouldn't obsess too much about exactly what's in the box. I'm very happy with whatever started, because I think the actual use will tell us how we finesse what goes in there. But essentially, you've got to think of it like a preview. You've got a preview state. It's the same document, it's the same data object, but you've got it either in a preview render, or you've got it in a full document render. So it's from my sort of perception of it, it's an object in space. But obviously behind the scenes, there's more work for you to say stand up a full reading space. Yep.
Another way of looking at it is there are only 3 states of a document: title and author in the list, pulled out showing title and author, open.
But there's also outline.
Oh yeah, sorry. Once you're reading the document, that is in the document rectangle. There you will have outline, references, all kinds of goodies. But the basic is open and close.
But this is all one object that does all of these things.
To the end user, yes. Hang on, I know you got it wrong.
Because I was looking at the preview that you gave, and I'm not seeing anything that looks like the document redesign you did. So I'm not understanding when the transition happens.
Okay, so
I get the concept where Mark is like, yeah, it switches between different, like that makes sense. But when do you want that to happen?
This one?
Yeah, when does it turn into that? Because all the new designs, it doesn't look like that.
Okay.
So I want to know when it switches. And how you picture that happening.
When you double click on the thing on the left here, or on an item here. If you double click on an item,
Can we ditch the double click? Does it have to be double click?
No.
We've got the quick
That's
pinch,
just,
and we've got because the double click feels terrible in XR.
Oh yeah. That's just my shorthand of saying you do an open action. That no. I don't mean literally necessarily double pinch, but so if you you are the main character, like this is selected. If I now do a open action, it opens into the white rectangle, right? If on this thing on the left, if I do an open action, this thing disappears, and I can do it literal. I know you're not stupid, but I am, so I'm going to do it like we need to see it. This thing on the left, double click on it, and it's replaced by this.
Yeah, so the one thing you won't have, the one thing I think we probably would presume at this point is you're not expecting to have the same object shown both as a preview and as a full object.
Okay,
so
and then
that's probably a toggle state.
What's the next slide? The one that has the sort of extended view. What is that then?
That's me misunderstanding Mark and Dini.
Okay, so that is actually the full document.
Yeah, so...
Okay, I understand now.
Yeah.
Cool, well, I now get it, thank you.
Yeah.
It seemed like there was an extra intermediate step that I just was not.
No, it's really
that there was, and we got rid of it.
Yeah, in a sense, you could think of it. The list is a list of object IDs, and you can either open it in one of 2 modes. One directly to the endpoint, which is a full read mode, or one via the preview mode. And from the preview mode, you can open it into the full mode, or just close the window.
Can the full mode turn back into the preview mode?
I don't see why not. In fact, I think it would be useful for it to do so. And unless that's problematic for you in a programming sense, no, I think it'd be extremely useful.
It would not be difficult programmatically if I can switch it one direction, I can go back. The problem is I don't know where to put that because that's another button. But if you guys can come up with a design for it, then we're good.
Okay.
Because
we can
switching
sweat
to
that
the
detail later.
document,
No, no. Okay. So this
selecting
is
the whole thing switches to the document. That's fine,
this
but
is
we can't go
this,
back.
these are the exact things that we needed to talk about today. So we can get rid of the bar. No, no, we can't. No, we need the bar. Sorry, because you now have the scrolling touch to scroll, which is fantastic. We keep the bar. Now, question for you, Andrew, is interaction-wise, would it make sense if your little finger on the mana menu was the close?
Oh, what do you mean? Like you select the thing and then you look at your hand and you do a function? That
Yes.
could work.
So you pull this out and you want to put it back. So now you look at your finger and boom, it goes back into the main list. That's another close. If you open it like this, you've selected it, look at your little finger, boom, up touch your little finger, boom, it goes back.
Yeah, I think we've talked about how did we agree that we wanted to be able to select things by like quick tapping on them? Well, actually, some things select, some things open. It's going to be a little bit weird.
I
If
think we
people
need to
don't
be
care.
slightly guided by iterative, because I think you'll probably have to get to the point that when you've built it, it will indicate to us really, whether those two options are both possible.
Well, let me
I think we'll have to work to some degree within constraints, because the main learning thing I'm taking from this is things that you thought might be possible turn out to be a little more complicated, just because of the space.
Okay, so let me ask you, Andrew, since you still have some time for us, thank you. In terms of the gestures that you currently have gone through and so much experience with, first of all, to select something here, pull it to the side, that's reasonable, right? Point to paper, do a pinch, pull it to the side, and it shows up like this, yes?
Well, I mean, I can do it. We don't have anything else that does that, which is why I hesitate, because it's bad to have a gesture that only works in one place. But yeah, I can do it.
Okay, because this is, Mark has really helped me over the last few days focus on what people are trying to do here is chunk things to see what to read and what not to read. That is really the key thing. So to be able to pull it out in an elegant manner is probably our number one interaction in this library space. Of course, it's only one space, but to the user, this is library. The second question, which is related to the first, is when they're pointing at one of these things, one of these papers, the pull towards your gesture you said didn't work very well, right? So what do you think should be the gesture to open or focus something?
Well, I thought we were removing the concept of just a single focus and just allowing the user to pull things forward and back. I may have misunderstood.
Not a single focus. Not a single focus. You can open many of these, but to make them into the white rectangle, to go from this to that, what do you think is the appropriate gesture to go from this to this?
What we were calling a double
I thought
tap,
we were tapping,
is not a
right?
good gesture.
Yeah, the double tap equivalent, which is
So we have right now a quick tap gesture that can do things. So we might as well use that. What I'm trying to avoid is having a bunch of different gestures to do minorly different things.
Agreed.
Right? So we've got a long press and drag. We've got a quick tap. That's like fundamentally everything. So if we can fit all the functions that we want into those two, that would be great. Otherwise, we can put like little buttons, because obviously you can select on buttons to do all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, buttons are the most boring, obviously.
They are.
Okay, so
if all you do with that little thing is drag it around or open it as a full document, then we've got the two that we need, right? There's no need for anything more than that.
So you're saying then to move to the side, it's select, move, let go, and it does that. Good. To open from the list or from one of the little floaty bits, it's quick tap, double tap basically, right? Quick tap.
It's a single tap. Double tap doesn't work well. That's why we're not using it right now.
Okay, it's quick tap. You mean it's a single tap? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's what we have right now to open the documents in the map view. Okay,
fine. So we have tap, move, let go. That's how you move. When you have something selected and you do just a tap, it opens, or actions. That is our action button. Fine. So now that we have this open, In the very early days when I was with you and guys in the wilderness of Washington State, I remember we could do too many things. We could do 3D things, and it wasn't very useful, conducive. But in order to close this, could you point to it and do a tap and push back? Very similar to
Not really.
sideways.
That was what I tested with the focus thing, and it's inconsistent. It's frustrating to use. We have the X button right now, but we probably want to move that somewhere else.
So what I would like you to do is to just have fun and play because you have a very good sense of this. All right, I'm not saying your responsibility is to fix this, but I'm saying that what you come up with is great to test. But all we need to build, and I'm using the word all with capital A, I'm not saying it's little, is a table of contents that essentially loads different views. Choose one, the table of contents is on the side through some cool animation. Whatever the criteria on the right are will show up on the left, they can be toggled. Point to something with your laser pointer. You get a floaty bit of abstract plus plus we'll play with over time. We may have options on the side to allow you to do things we know people are going to do a lot, such as hide, not necessarily written out.
Is
Use-
that floaty bit showing up on hover or tap?
That's to be experimented with. I don't know. Probably hover because you have that now and it works well.
Well, hover might be annoying because it's cool at first, but see how large it is? If you then want to you can't read the full titles of any of the other documents behind it.
But if you
So
go,
to look at stuff, you almost have to move your hand away.
yes, you do. You have to move your hand away. But
Okay, if that's fine, then we can do that.
Is hover problematic in the sense that hover, you have to keep pointing at it, and if it's sort of, you might. I mean, the point is, so the hover, is there a way to basically indicate something but not have to keep pointing at it to hold a selection?
it can be sticky like it kind of is now. If you move your hand right or left, it'll stay on hover. You have to pinch outside of the box, so to speak, to deselect.
Okay, yeah.
Andrew, does that make sense as well?
No, you said it. So it sticks on hover, and then you have to tap to close it.
You know what? No, let's
It's gonna be
really.
lots of stuff stuck in the way then.
Okay, user point.
Does tap do anything on these? Does tapping on these do anything? Because if it doesn't, just have this open on tap.
Yeah, I think user on tap, open on tap shows the hover bits. Just tap, quick tap, right? So you
And
go
yeah,
to a point, you see, and then if you move your hand away, it's still there. You have to tap again, and then it goes away, right?
right. It doesn't even have to be a quick tap. Just tapping in general will do
Yeah,
it.
very good.
And then you drag to the left, and that instead opens the little sort of preview document box. And then tapping on the preview box opens the full document.
Tap and drag to the location you want it to be.
I
So
thought you just drag it off to the left.
yes, but ideally, from here, like drag it up here.
So you can just freely take any of the things.
And
But essentially, that's the spatial hypertext element. The thing is, so that there are two parts to this: is what the user wants to put this thing over there because that's where their brain just decided it wants to go. What we're discussing is how you get in terms of the engineering of it, you get a clear indication to the system as to what the user means. Now, if they have to drag it off to the left and then move it, that might be something we do in the short term until we find something better.
No, that would actually be more complicated.
Okay, right. Well, fine. Just go with less complicated.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking though is if you drag it off, right, that means it's always able to be dragged. So when you're trying to tap things, the hand always moves a little bit. So if you're tapping on something that's draggable, it moves a little bit.
Okay.
So you're going to be kind of dragging all of the objects around slightly. Um,
I think
that
that's
means I
fine.
would probably have some animation that when you let go, it kind of slides back to where it should be. So
Yeah.
everything will feel kind of floaty.
Mhm.
If that's okay,
That's
then
not
we're good
okay.
with that.
I don't think that's okay. I think that's very good.
Okay.
That's a benefit.
So then when you drag it, you have to drag it essentially outside the bounds.
Yes.
Yeah.
or drag it like far enough for it to trigger an effect.
Yeah, and you,
I guess
I
it'd
think
probably be
probably,
distance based,
and
like
you
how far it
you will
traveled.
know better than us really what turns out to be, what's that, because the main thing is you or your code needs to have a clear indication that state transition has occurred.
Okay.
Yes.
And then that spawns the little preview, and the little preview, we don't know really what's in it yet. It's just title and authors right now.
Exactly. And the thing is, you've got the data object. You've got access
Yeah.
to the data
I've
object.
got I got access to the information.
Exactly. So for now, we can put some stuff in it, and we can sweat the detail of what that is later.
Yeah,
And that can be dragged
Once
around.
we've got the basics going, yeah, we can see how they work.
very importantly, the dragged off bit should show as little as possible, but enough that you can visually glance at it to remember what it represents. Because if we do our gestures right, when you go into full reading mode, it should all be there. This we'll have to revisit to add, not add functionality, but to decide maybe the header will have some of these things like long papers, maybe it'll have some extra metadata, right? So that when Mark goes through this and think this is kind of interesting, drags it out, this is just on a cork board. There'll be many of these. They'll be all over the place. It'll be a complete mess in the good sense. Oh, I need to know more. I open it. I have this. And now it's really, really important that it's really quick to get rid of as well as it is to move around. If you want to snap this towards where you want to read it, we have the bar. That's kind of solved. You want to scroll up and down. Oh my goodness, Andrew, you made that beautiful. But if I now want to get rid of this, it should feel like a throwing away gesture. We don't know yet what will work, but it should feel something. It shouldn't be an XOR button like that. Because
Yeah, we really don't want more gestures.
No. It should be within our library of click and drag to the side, click to open, because toggling between these two is really important.
Well, maybe what we could have then, if we're establishing if you drag it to a place, it does a thing. We could have, on a phone, if you are trying to uninstall an app, you drag it to like the trash can or something. So we could have maybe a space somewhere, like some clear like circle with an X or something in the space, and if you drag the object into that, it kind of like removes it.
No,
I don't know how that would work with depth,
no.
I
but
think
we
it
can't
wants to
keep
go
adding
back.
gestures.
We could make it throw it up in the air. Can we do that? And that collapses it.
If you move your hand fast, it loses the tracking. That's the problem with all of these fast gestures. It wants slow movements. That's the big issue we have.
I have just a thought is that, I mean, one thing I think we probably skipped past is the fact that if I directly open the full reading state, either the white rectangle for want of a better description, and when I close that, well, I guess it closes back into the list because it has no preview state. Whereas if it was open from a preview, I think one thing that we'll need to rely on you to indicate is the point at which the number of objects we've torn off approaches essentially an overload in the, if so that one of the things we discussed is whether these background objects at some point need to essentially just become like picture placeholders or just blobs or something, mainly because we're both aware of the issue you've raised about trying to move around too much stuff as text, which is nice there representationally, but if we're not trying to read it, we don't actually need it to be fully functional text.
Yeah, what's interesting here, the performance doesn't actually come from the amount of text. It comes from the amount of text pieces. And I'll differentiate what that means. The documents are actually fairly efficient the way I've written them. You can have at least around 10 before you start to feel it. On the other hand, this like library preview thing, every single line, because every line can be interacted with, it's all its own text object, and that is way more intensive than the documents. So it's every time you have a piece of text that does something different than the text around it, that we start to get the performance issues.
Okay.
So it'd be actually better to have a way of easily hiding the library rather than hiding the documents. That's where the bigger concern is going to come from.
Oh, you mean the library behind here? Okay.
Well, no, you mean the list.
Yeah, I don't know what to call it at this point.
Yeah. So what you're seeing on the right of the screen, on the right of your Photoshop screen at the moment, or Keynote screen. Yes, I see what you mean. So in other words, the sort of like the proceedings list or the binding or whatever. So the binding that we're working off is essentially computationally expensive because of all the hit targets in it. Okay,
It's more computationally intensive than a document.
sure,
Well,
sure. Yeah.
okay, I say that, but now if the documents are going to have all of that, now the documents are back to being more. It's just a case of how many different interactive pieces are there.
Does a
Because the way
document?
Troika is super efficient at rendering tons of text in a block.
Mhm.
But it takes the same amount of effort to render an entire paragraph as it does a single letter.
Got it.
At least that's as far as I've
Okay,
experienced it.
but this is fine. This is absolutely fine, Andrew. One of the things we can do is, I'm really glad you're highlighting this now, is when you go from this to this, I don't mind, Mark, tell me if you agree, that the list of papers, when you go from this to this, in other words, when you double click on this little floaty bit, it goes away and all you have is the outline.
Yeah, I might put it on a timer if you're okay with that. Like you haven't
Yeah.
interacted with it for 30 seconds and it just closes itself. And that would help save resources.
And
Can it? I mean,
when you
when it
touch this,
closes,
it
can
comes
it be a
back down.
shadow essentially? Something that
No,
broadly
but look,
indicates what it is. Yeah.
you have this, you have the thing on the right, you touch that, and the main thing comes back out. And this thing automatically closes then. Right now, we're just saying computer's not strong enough. So you're either looking at this or this. So when
Yeah,
this,
it's like I want to let the users overload it if they really want to have a ton of stuff, but we want to guide them so they don't do it by accident.
Yep.
yeah,
So that's really where we want to be there. And that's not an issue for this initial discussion. That's just a long term, when we have like, 7 documents open, how do we want things to function?
Yeah. I
I think
think.
the one last thing I've got a question on, I'm sorry, Mark.
Yeah. No. 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 Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted.
Uh,
Go ahead.
because it sounds like we want to have a way of switching the document back into the little preview box. That makes sense in case you accidentally turn it into a document, you want to be able to turn it back. We want to use the same gesture of a quick tap anywhere on the document. Currently doesn't do anything. Quick tap on the document converts it back into a small little preview. Would that be good? It could trigger by accident when scrolling, so we have to test that and see.
okay.
But I think generally people scroll longer than the quick tap. And I can also put in another sort of gate on the quick tap that as long as you don't move very far. So that might be enough. The downside with that is that quick tap then wouldn't be for selection. But
We need
I
that
think
in the future. We definitely need selection in the future. I have 7 minutes. I have to go on the hour, even though
yeah.
this is so important. So we have to remember we're going to have the table of contents here as well, right?
No, quick one. Does that have to show when the document is not the active selected document? So if I open four
The
documents,
table of contents,
that table of
Table of
contents on the
contents
side is
only
it
shows
only,
up when you swipe over, right? That was what we decided.
yes, it
It's not
only
always
appears
visible.
when you touch this, when you point to this little indicator. The
so
most,
I
the
I
most
think
of
you
the
want
time
it,
it's not there.
yeah, you want it larger than that than just the little indicator because it's hard to touch the indicator. But yes, we've got a plan for that part. It won't always be there, so it won't be too resource intensive.
The
Yeah, that's what I
indicator,
mean. So yeah, if you've
yeah,
got 5 windows open, you're not necessarily looking at 5 tables of contents as well with all these
absolutely
different
not.
bits.
So
Yeah.
the gradation here will be from document color to background color, so it will appear as though it is transparent, even though it's not. I
Yeah,
don't
that's what it's currently supposed to be. It doesn't look right.
know, but
That's what it's set to.
that's computers, and computers are annoying in that sense. I don't mind having a bigger hitbox around this for the mouse over, because nothing else will be in that spot. So that's one of the cases it's
What
okay.
we really what we pitched first was if you use off the
I
right
can't, I
document, it
can't
pops
hear
out.
you very well.
Is that
Come again, please. Couldn't hear
oh
you very well.
uh yeah, getting unstable internet warning. We had talked about the cursor off the right side of the page just
Sure.
brought that up. It didn't have to be on the notch. Is that still okay? Or is that something that you want to refine it back down to just the little notch?
It's entirely for you to experiment with. It seems fine
Okay,
with
I'll test that.
right. So one of the key things is I think when any document opens, I really think it's good that the list of documents closes and we only see this thing on the side, because otherwise we'll get very, very messy. Now this table of content thing can go a little further back. And yes, of course, it should be possible for Mark to have many of these little pieces floating about and to open every single one of them if he wants to. So if he wants to have 20 documents open at the time, nothing wrong with that. Just going to pretend we've closed that down. Now, we still have one issue left. We have 4 minutes, and that is how to close this darn thing. So we have an action area down here to move it. We have the scaling triangle here, which is an indicator. We have this thing. We could, of course, in the lower left-hand corner have an X, which I think would be a capitulation. It would be awful.
Well, we got an I right there right now. What does the I do? And if it does nothing, why have it there? Put something else.
The I is meant to indicate in the future, you touch it, you flip the document around, 180 degrees, and on the back you have all kinds of metadata stuff, or even
Okay.
data. It's just like a cheat thing for the future. But I really, okay, how about this then? What about if you point to it? Can you do this?
Add another gesture.
Yeah,
I really don't want more gesture. I can put them in. I can absolutely do it. I'm just
okay.
telling you, it's going to get super confusing for users.
Okay, Andrew, I agree with you. But let's look at it the other way around then. So we have this selection stuff, but if you want to open something, and I'm obviously asking both of you, how about if you're here and you've selected something, maybe you have to do this, like an open gesture. So open and closed, because we do a lot of clicking to move around, and we don't want accidental things. We can do open, and this is close. Make sense or not? I don't know.
It won't be pointing because the point gesture is this. So everything has to start with this if you want to be interacting with an object, unless we change the start gesture, right?
So everything has to be a gun to start with.
Yeah. So if you want to have it be like you point at it and then you do that, technically that just turns it off right now. But you could try to trigger a function on that. I don't know. It really can for new
I know
users.
it's
You
a
want to
cop
keep
out,
it as
but
minimal.
But no, but Andrew, this is something we don't need to resolve today. What we have resolved today, I
Okay.
think, is very, very good. What we have decided is we need a nice way to decide what's in the list, a natural way to put it off to the side where you want it. It gets small, and then a natural way to read the whole document where other things go away, and then a natural way to close it. Exactly what gesture doesn't matter today. That's the kind of thing for the next
if
few
you get
months, right?
stuck, and we have to use the lower left as a temporary close, knowing that it's not the full time thing. If that gets you to where you need to go, I think that's something we could certainly live with. I know we
Yeah.
have
For
plans for
now,
the
that's
future, but we're not
probably
doing
what
that
I'll
now.
do.
I think
Yeah.
because I don't want it to hold you up, but because if you can do that, then you have the other parts functional, and we can circle around and figure out a more elegant.
Now, the one last thing is that's to close it. There's still no way to switch it back unless you find it with me doing the quick tap on the document as a whole. Is that okay? Can I try that?
I mean, ideally,
It doesn't do anything else right now.
Andrew, do what the heck
Mhm.
you want because you always do clever things. Absolutely. The feeling has to be there's something on the screen, I open it somehow, right? And then I want to get rid of it. So that there is ideally the pushing and pulling. You're saying that's got issues, fair enough. It could also be we learn a language like where you lift it up, that may be a speed. So I don't worry about this at all. We have months for this because your job now, so to speak, is to on action this thing happens. What the action
Got a
is.
lot less time. It's yeah, it's July. But yeah, okay.
No,
I've
no,
got enough to
you're
work
right.
on for sure.
We don't have a lot of time, and as Mark said, which of course I completely disagree with, but realistically he's right. If we end up having an X, we have an X. If we end up having an open button, we have an open button. But making these things actually work is the key thing at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got quite a bit to work on. The stuff that you've pitched here will take probably at a minimum the rest of the month. So I've got things to do.
Good. So if you and Deanie need me on Friday, like we used to have Friday meetings, I'm available to go through this again. I know you're having a meeting after this to prioritize.
Yeah, I have a different job on Fridays, so I
Oh,
really
okay.
can't meet
No, that's
unless
fine.
it's absolutely necessary.
Tonight, I cannot do any kind of video meeting, but if you send me something to look at, of course I will. And this is very exciting. I'm very grateful. And it's exactly on the dot. Very good. See you on Monday unless there's anything before that.
And you can prompt me on Slack if you want anything directly.
Yeah, we're there. Bye.